Welcome to What the Heck's, your source for Warhammer Underworlds in under 30 violations of the Geneva Suggestion. I'm your co-host Josh, and with me are Phil. Say hi, Phil.
Hi, Phil.
Hello. And Skylar. How you doing, Skylar?
Neither of you, as far as I can tell, are plagued right now, correct?
That is
Recently
correct.
recovered.
Not ideal.
Despite some close encounters. So, some context for our listeners. We're recording on July 23rd. Weird Hollow is the season, and I never thought I'd say this again, but it is raining stormcats and demon dogs out there. 2 magic-based warbands are ravaging the meta, so a quick reminder to check in on your local wizards. They might be a little high on themselves and in danger of suffering some backlash right about now. Our topic for today, a new Skaven warband is skittering towards us from the sewers in Weird Hollow, but first let's hit our regularly scheduled beats. First, some community shoutouts. We have our local tournament here in the Madison area on August 13th. Skylar, you got some more details on that?
Sure. It's going to be 3 rounds of best of 3 in the championship format, and we hope to see you there.
That is going to be at our normal location in Noble Knight Games in Fitchburg, Wisconsin. So if you're in the area, please come on by. We'd love to have you. And if you're not, let us know that you're rooting for us anyway.
Absolutely. And for more information, we have built a page around the event that can be found on themortalrealms.com.
All right. And any other community shout outs, y'all?
I have one. We had a U.S. Open recently in Tacoma, Washington, with a grand clash following the Nemesis format, and it was taken by one Gnarl Spirit pack fielded by Damien. Shout out, Damien. But my community shout out actually goes to 4th place, and that is Fish Mode from the Spent Glory blog, rocking Sons of Valmorn. And getting all the way up to that 4th place spot with them.
Going hard mode there.
You love to see an unsupported bastard move up to the top. Well, referring to Sir Jedrin, of course.
Yeah, and if you would like to learn more about Sons of Valmorn competing in this Grand Clash, Fish Mode has taken to his blog and done a worthy write-up of the occasion that I recommend taking a look at.
Sweet. Cool to see somebody still working on them. Still working, trying to figure that puzzle out.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to head over to that blog and see what's cooking, because that was a nut I couldn't crack. All right, so what the heck is going on with you two? Skylar, what's up? What's good?
Well, I recently recorded our last episode. So in the space of the 2 episodes, I will say I got some hobby organization done, and that feels really great. My war bands, specifically the models for them, started sprawling in multiple shelves inside like desks and stuff like that. And so now I have some battle foam magna racks that fit the entire entourage that exists today, with a little room to grow. So I kind of like customized a magna rack solution that could fit to the space I had, and I'm just happy to have that all done and have everything magnetized and ready to go there. Definitely
an unsung glory of the hobby is getting that organization done. Phil, how about yourself? What's new? What's good?
Well, as mentioned, recently recovered from the blessings of Nurgle. Actually, the last episode that I was on, I unknowingly yet at that point was actually fighting COVID. It was like just the very start of it, but quickly took me down after that. So I haven't done a whole lot, but I am very much looking forward to our tournament. I've continued repping the Damatan Storm Coven. They have been fun to figure out for me, although looking at online successes that they've been having. Maybe not so much as a wide, across the whole community. So maybe I'll have to switch back to my lizards here pretty soon, since they're not getting as much love. But it's been fun casting spells again after what feels like an eternity. And yeah, that's about it. Josh, have you been doing anything in the hobby lately?
I have. I've actually been kind of splitting my attention between two game systems, and it shows. I've got a Domatan Storm Coven of my own that's about half to 2/3 painted, and I've got a 40k Chaos Knight that is also sitting on my hobby table, about 2/3 painted. So
that is
chasing two hobbies, and both of them are escaping.
Significantly larger undertaking.
Oh yeah. So that's what's going on in my neck of the woods. Shall we talk about some diseased rats?
I would love to. I'd say before we move on from what's going on with us and community shoutouts, I'm going to combine one together, because this Thursday night was a Thursday night after our league had concluded. So, directly following finals, generally you'll see a lot of players take a break during this week, or you'll see people, just come out and with this, relaxed energy, just throw down. And sometimes we do crazy game modes, including Arena Mortis, as kind of a palate cleanser. And this week, 4 of them sat down to a 4-player multiplayer game that lasted a little over 2 hours, and they invited me to the table. They're like, "I'm sure we can make 5 players work." I'm like, no.
I'm sure you cannot.
Belmorn's taking 4th place. Multiplayer's hitting the table. What is this hobby?
So shout out to Bobby, Alex, Jazz, and Ben for all tackling that. And Ben, special shout out to you for your Buccaneers Pirates. And you heard me correctly. That's not a pirate ogre. That's a pirate ogre conversion that has happened, as if getting into the spirit of our next warband already.
Speaking of our next warband and bad segues, let's talk about those. So we'll break this down section by section. We'll do some first impressions, we'll break down their fighter cards, and then go into each subsection of card in turn. So starting off, let's do a little breakdown of the plot card that they come with. So for starters, this is their gig. They're all about corrupting different regions of the board. So similar to a lot of decks that have their own specifications and their own desires, like being in enemy territory, being in no man's land, or being near no man's land. This one is at the end of an action phase, a player's and or no one's territory are corrupted by your warband if one or more of the following are true. 2 or more friendly fighters are in that territory. 1 or more friendly befoulers on an objective in that territory. And then when a territory becomes corrupted, it remains corrupted until the end of the next action phase, even if this is as the result of a power card. So that's a big mouthful, basically saying that if you've got 2 fighters in an area, or you've got 1 fighter with a keyword on an objective in said area, it too gains a keyword. So Skylar, Phil, talk to me. First impressions about this warband as you were kind of coming in and looking at them.
Yeah, I can kick that off. So for me, the thing I like the most about this plot card is, and you kind of figure this out as you look at the fighters, you see the keyword here, befouler, and you think to yourself, okay, how many of them are befoulers? And when you look, we've got 6 fighters, and 4 of them are inherently befoulers. 2 of them are lacking that. So what I like is that 2 or more fighters can make this happen regardless of keyword and regardless of objective-based positioning. So I find that really interesting, that as long as you can get, a count of 2 into the territory lines here, you can work towards this. It does immediately like come to mind as something that you're not going to see. You're not going to see your Inspire round 1. So you kind of got to play round 1 safe. And that's something that like I'm just really familiar with cutting my teeth on Skace Wild Hunt. It's like you got to figure out which 4 you're charging with, and it's not Lihan. And you're not going to gain the benefits of charging into Inspire until the next round. So a little akin to that for me. But those are kind of the initial beats. What about you, Phil?
So this, to me, on first read, I thought this feels weird. This feels a little bit like Kagra's Ravagers, in that you're having to like work towards this board state control thing, but the benefits from doing so are delayed. And that kind of set off some alarm bells, because I was like, Kagra's Ravagers really had a rough time of it trying to make their thing work. And so I tried to read through the cards sort of in order. So I was like, this is the first thing about the warband that I read. So I was like, this seems bad, but I wanted to reserve judgment until you get to the rest of the cards to be like, is there something that makes this better? And I think it is. It's not as bad as Ravagers. Not that that's a very high bar to beat, but I think there's some interesting tricks here. And so it's certainly a push-pull dynamic. I think it would be remiss not to mention that their Inspire mechanic is directly tied to this. So they need 2 or more territories corrupted by your warband specifically to be able to get this Inspire. So even in the mirror match, you're not going to be able to more easily get your Inspire. This also feels a little bit like a bookkeeping nightmare, because if you have multiple people, or even I guess just for yourself, having to keep track of like, okay, I corrupted this territory, that lasts until the end of this next activation phase. Then it goes away. What if I've inspired a new one, or corrupted a new one, I should say. So it's kind of a lot, but I'm here for it. We can puzzle this one out together.
So, not to get too deep into the weeds with that, but one of the things that Skylar and I did during a sample game was we used the handy dandy markers that are in most of the core boxes, and we used one color to show when a territory would be corrupted at the end of the round, just to help us kind of keep track. And then we used a different color to show when something was actively corrupted. Sure. And then had those on kind of the edge of the board in one of those little half hexes, so it wasn't getting in the way of anything and was clearly visible.
Yeah. So and that was an exercise with...
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. And that was an exercise with wanting to get used to the mechanic. Just kind of like immediately we're both like, okay, new warband on the table. They do this corruption thing. Let's take note of that as we're playing, and that type of bookkeeping is not necessarily something that a Plaguepack player would necessarily want to broadcast to their opponent. Hey, if you don't do something about this, it's about to corrupt. But for the purposes of learning, when corruption is going to take place, between both players, it was a nice habit to do.
And I still think even in normal play, it would be kind of a courtesy to show when they are corrupted, just to give kind of a visual signifier, because there are cards that do give buffs and different bents to that kind of stuff. So at least knowing when that's actively happening would be courteous.
Yeah, some sort of marker that indicates corruption has occurred. This territory is currently corrupted would definitely benefit them from a bookkeeping standpoint for sure.
And on that note, I think the only thing that really kind of threw me for a loop was trying to keep track, even though we were keeping pretty good track, keeping track of when things were corrupted mid-action phase. that was when it was like, how do we show that this lasts through the next
Right.
action phase?
Right. And on that note, I wish that this plot card included some sort of line just clarifying that a territory corrupted can become corrupted. Because there isn't a line saying otherwise, I believe that you can. And that's the way that we ended up playing it is, because this corruption lasts until the end of the next activation phase, right? But if you want to keep that corruption going, then you got to recorrupt, right? And hopefully you don't have to wait until corruption breaks. And I think the answer there is nothing says that you can't corrupt an already corrupted area. So therefore you can, right? They would clarify you cannot. And so because you can, then you're good. But it would have been nice to, just get a line on this a plot card that says, a already corrupted territory can be corrupted again. What they did go out of their way to include is for the mirror match, and happy to see that a territory can be corrupted by multiple warbands at the same time. So you can have, you can own the corruption from a different warband there, I believe is how I'm reading that. Is it has to be your corruption?
Yeah. It tracks per warband.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's nice.
Yeah. All right. So those are our first impressions, the plot card, kind of our hopes and dreams about this warband. So let's do just a quick deep dive on the fighter cards themselves. And folks, if you want to see a full breakdown of each of these individual cards and our thoughts and feelings on each one, you can go to whatthehex.com and see our blog post on that there.
Oh, we don't have that URL, but themortalrealms.com will do the trick for them.
You know what? I wish we had whatthehex.com. Santa Claus, if you're listening, that's what I would like for Christmas.
New URL.
Is my own URL, or our own URL, so to speak. All right, moving on into the fighter cards. So just a quick overview. So these are pretty speedy, skittery little boys. They're all on move 4, except for the teeny tiniest of rat boys. He's at move 5, so he's a zoomy little bugger. And defensive profiles, kind of rough amongst them. So they are all on a single die, and some of them inspire from a single dodge up into a shield. Most of those are the more important ones, except for, again, the littlest boy. He goes from 1 dodge all the way up to 2 dodge. So having the most defensive dice profile in the entire lot. We go from our leader having 4 wounds and moving on down from a smattering of 3 wounds and some fighters with 2 wounds, inspiring up to 3. And then our tiniest little ready boy, who we love and adore, is at 1 wound. So
it's a choice.
it is definitely a choice, and we'll talk more about him once we kind of get to his profile.
Oh,
so our
boy, will we.
Our leader here, he's got a pretty typical leader staff profile on his attack, and then he houses the keyword Befouler. I want to give a shout out to our listeners here, as I personally just took Befouler as a keyword in our game this morning, and not realizing that it actually did something. So on this fighter card, you've got Befouler. At the start of each round, stagger each enemy fighter adjacent to this fighter. So, don't get tripped up. That is not just a keyword. It does do something. He inspires up to one of my least favorite upgrades amongst Inspire mechanics, and that is moving from 2 hammer accuracy up to 3 sword accuracy.
Really?
Doing the same amount of damage and grievous. I dislike that because, yes, it is statistically more likely, but it feels bad.
I mean, when it says grievous and it inspires into just more dice in general, I'm happy to see it.
Oh, yeah. It's It's still my least favorite profile.
That's fair.
Excuse me, my least favorite Inspire
Ah.
bonus.
You know, circling back to your Befouler comment, something that they've actually updated since the starter pack or the latest starter set that we saw with Sepulchral Guard and Farstriders, not the new one yet, haven't seen that. They said that if a keyword underneath their name is upright, it's like an actual keyword where, well, you know what? And then there's like supposed to be italicized text if it's like, hey, Zinch, what's up? So you almost think that Priest would have been italicized here and Befouler would have been like straight up. Okay. Well, I'll definitely be diving back into the rulebook later to see what that distinction was supposed to be.
Sounds good. Well, next up, we've got our second in command, almost, you might call him, is Rubidius Skench. So he's got two attack profiles to his name, and he is also a Befouler. So his first attack profile is a range 2 sword, 3 damage, just single target bonk. It's not very accurate, but it's a rude one for sure. Next up here, and this is a little bit more tasty and kind of gives him a little bit more flavor, is a 1 range, 2 sword, 2 damage scything attack. So can confirm that while inaccurate, it definitely sends a message if you can get it out turn 1. Isn't that right, Skylar?
Yeah, can send a message. Turns out you can still roll crits, regardless of how many dice you're throwing. Turns out.
Yeah.
So,
it's very reminiscent of Ardskull from the Morgoth's Crushes, where he starts on 2 fury, 3 damage, and I think he starts with scything as well. He ends up with scything no matter what. I know that for sure. And it's like,
he's not the most accurate boy, but oh, buddy, if he hits, he hits. And
coming.
Yup.
You better hope he doesn't hit because he's
and
doing work.
Our boy Rubidius here, he inspires up to a little bit more accuracy. So goes up to hammers on his single bonk and gains an extra die on his scything attack. Next up, we've got Mr. Itchit. So he's got a pretty mellow profile until you look at that text. So he is also a Befouler, and everyone but Skabic has minion, if I haven't mentioned that yet. He's got a very simple attack profile, 2 dice, looking for swords, single damage, nothing to write home about, really. But the fun is in his bonus action. So it's Book of Woe. Action. Roll 1 magic die for each enemy fighter in the same territory as this fighter. On a roll of focus, deal 1 damage to that fighter. That, when he inspires, goes to channel instead. So you go from a 1 in 3 chance of dealing a single ping damage to every fighter, a 1 in 3 chance each of dealing a damage to each fighter in the same territory as him, going up to a 50-50 shot of dealing a damage to each fighter. That's a lot of ping. It's a lot of ping for 1 action.
It certainly can be. It's a lot of setup, since you can't do this on like a charge, and if you have charged, you're not going to be able to do it again. So it's frequently one of those things that we see where it's like, oh, this action's really cool, but the action economy to do it is not great. So I do wonder, like, what are going to be the tricks that people have to use to make this effective? I don't know. Did you get to do it at all in the game you guys played?
So I got to do it once, and it lucked out. And Skylar, I think it did damage to 2 of them out of the 5.
That is correct.
Which on a 1 in 3. Pretty statistically consistent, and it happened to do a ping to the one that I needed 1 damage on to kill. So is that going to be a silver bullet and make these guys the be-all, end-all? No. But it's definitely nothing to sleep on.
I like the 50-50 tied to an action. if you can inspire them going into round 2, like there's a chance, you know, you can get him over the line so that he can take that action on the most populated territory, right? That could be momentous, but again, it could be nothing. I think the focus is a little rough prior to the inspire.
I think so too. I do like that it really incentivizes not doing it right away, right? Like if you use all of your tech to get him into enemy territory and just to make that pop off, that's going to be when you're going to have the most target rich environment. But after you've inspired, you know, fighters are going to be charging into your territory. They're going to be trying to claim objectives in no man's land. They're going to be kind of all over the place. So while it is more accurate, you're going to have fewer bodies to use it on. So I think that's pretty fairly balanced from a use case.
Do you think it would have been too good if it also registered on crits?
I think so. I think a 50-50 out the gate, ping on everybody in enemy's territory, moving up to a 66% chance of dealing a ping to everybody. You know what? I would almost have considered crits to do backlash.
Oh, sure.
So maybe as a kind of incentive to not just do this time after time after time.
Yeah.
Or maybe even limiting it to once per round.
At that point, then it becomes way too dangerous, right? If you had to every crit dealt backlash.
Yeah.
Backlash.
Maybe cap it. Like
once per action.
Once per action, suffer backlash if you roll any crits. But anyway, we're getting a bit into it there. So our next two are pretty plain Jane as far as things go. So we've got Poxlix and Ricket. Both very similar defensive profiles. They're going to be on a single dodge, inspiring up to 1 shield, and inspiring from 2 wounds to 3 wounds. Ricket's got a long stick, and Poxlix has 2 knives. So naturally, Poxlix is throwing 3 swords into 4 when he inspires, and Ricket is throwing 2 swords, but going up in more consistent damage. So he goes from having Grievous with 1 to just a flat 2 damage.
So I really
These are
like
kind of your chaff bodies.
Yeah.
So they've got a little bit to play with their attack profiles, but for all intents and purposes, they only have the minion keyword and not the Befouler. So this is kind of your pair to throw together to hold one territory as opposed to trying to claim an objective.
I do really like it when they shore up Grievous damage into the Inspire. I think that's a nice chef's kiss too when you have a Grievous on the previous side.
Yeah. It's like taking your lumps and learning a little more accuracy.
It's the equivalent, right, of going from 2 smash to 3 swords. Right? You're getting just the tiniest boost.
Is it?
Yeah, pretty much. It is an improvement, but not a lot.
Dealing a damage on a 1 in 6 chance versus just doing a extra flat damage if you succeed. I'm gonna disagree on that one.
What I will say that I think we can agree on is I like the consistency here with the 2 minions and their stat line, right? It's like, okay, so my minions that aren't a Befouler, what happens to them? Well, when they inspire, they go from single dodge to single shield, and they go from 2 health to 3, and they both do that. You don't have to think too hard about, like, oh, does this one do 2 dodge and stay at 2 health while this one goes up to that 1 shield and that 3 health? Like, no, it's your minions that aren't Befoulers will gain an extra wound and a short up defensive dice there. I like
and that. Speaking of that consistency, they kind of knocked it out of the park on visual representation here too, because all of our fighters that have a baked in Befouler profile have either, with our next fighter, the littlest boy, either a chunk of warpstone or a stink basket that they're carrying.
Stink basket.
So it
believe-
definitely has a visual indicator of, oh, these guys have that keyword.
For all you people who love this clan of clan pestilence, we do know that it's called a plague sensor. Don't worry. We're not hating on your warband. Continue.
I echo that statement, but I am not going to stop calling it a stink basket.
No, that's fine.
That's just, it's happening now. So on to our littlest boy. So Mr. Skritter here, as previously mentioned, his defensive profile is, I would say, a choice bordering on oversight. So he's got 1 dodge, 1 health uninspired, and 2 dodge, 1 health when inspired. And he's got, again, not digging on the clan pestilence lovers out there, he has a keyword that is, and I'm not making this up, worthless. If this fighter would be taken out of action, remove it from the battlefield and clear all counters and persisting effects from this fighter, it is not taken out of action. So worded very similarly to our least favorite fish on the podcast.
Yeah.
And
Whoa.
does not have the common courtesy to give up glory. Now, given that he is a one and done kind of guy, I kind of understand that. And his attack profile is, once again, nothing to write home about. Two dice looking for swords and a single damage on both the uninspired and inspired side.
Okay, Lehan wants to know why you're not willing to write home. That's his profile.
Lehan knows exactly why I don't write home.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, and in case it needed any clarification, this little boy is also a beast, so cannot hold objectives.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when I first read this card, I thought to myself, like, as I was reading Worthless, I would see amongst the text there that either A, there was a way to bring him back akin to the fish, maybe at the start of a round. Like, I thought, okay, like, you know, if the rat dies, this little cute Skritter will at least, you know, because he's got that 1 health, be able to see him at the start of each round, and he'll just, you know, respawn, or you know, another rat enters the scene each round. Not present, or at least if he's not going to respawn, some way to negate ping damage, right? Like some inherent, I cannot be pinged. I must die by an attack action.
No.
Not present.
Yeah, no, he I would have
worthless.
loved more of the respawn and for it to be at the end of an action phase, simply to give a little bit of a boost to their corrupted game plan. So even limiting it to an already occupied territory, so you need to have at least 1 in that territory to make things happen. Maybe bringing him in on an edge hex, kind of mimicking that rat swarm motif, or even just a starting hex, just to kind of give it some limitations and some, like, we can't just go fluffy for the sake of, you know, abandoning that there are rules and gameplay mechanics, but giving him some sort of utility so that he wasn't just ping bait, like exchanging a ping card for a body that doesn't give up glory is kind of where I'm at with this guy.
Yeah. So, I mean, right away, this fighter tells you that Daring Delvers is going to be a rough matchup for you, because if you want to use this fighter to move, there's a chance that Quick Roots can come out and just take him down. And in Champs...
Actually, he, now that I look at this a little bit more, he doesn't score sudden demise for your opponent because he would not be taken out of action.
so
he would just be removed from the board. So while while he is ping bait and he's easy to deal with, at least he's not giving up glory in any sense of the word when it comes to surges. He is going to be out of action, but
Yeah.
not taken out of action.
Yeah, that's something that we saw
if
in our
that
game.
makes sense.
I needed a count of 2 fighters out of action, right?
Yeah.
And so I took one down the hard way, and then I went, you know what? I'm going to pick on Skritter real quick, knock Skritter off the board nice and easy. And, we were both like, yep, I don't get a glory for this, right? Spine fin in action here. But then when it came to end phase scoring, I at least got to count it as out of action. So there is that. It can be an easy target for your opponents if they're looking for that sort of end phase.
Yeah. So it's one of those where he's not a desirable target, but he's definitely not one that you really have to commit too much to.
Yeah. I will say if you're playing champs, you're going to be super nervous about seeing lethal ward if you're using this guy to befoul an objective.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. It's an odd design choice, to be sure. It's also one that's often been a headache when we have fighters that say they are not taken out of action, because there's a lot of cards that trigger around if a fighter would be taken out of action, or all this stuff, and then immediately has to become this question of does this block all of that because the fighter's technically not taken out of action as written? Probably, but it's annoying to have that wording on a card. So now that we've got 2, and it's
3, we got the first dog too.
Oh yeah, first dog, but it's not inherent to the dog. It's just
and the dog is also technically taken out of action. He's just not giving up glory.
Doesn't give away glory. Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, it's fine. I don't want to lean too much into judging anything here, just because we've only played, as far as I know, you guys have only played the one game, and I haven't gotten to actually touch the models yet. So that is the last fighter for the warband. I'm not sure what to make of these guys. If I had to put them in a category, we've got our hold objective warbands, we've got our control warbands, we've got our aggro warbands. I'm not entirely sure where I'd put these guys at first glance. I'm thinking they're like an aggro hold flex, but man, their defensive stats really don't support that well.
Yeah, they're right off the rip. My initial impression with them was the whole corrupted thing had me thinking okay, this is a plague warband that wants to spread that plague and maybe bait your opponent into a chase 2 rabbits and catch neither scenario. So basically you're kind of spreading out around the outskirts of the board and trying to cover as much territory as possible. And if a couple of them die, oh no, I've still got, 1 or 2 territories that are corrupted and can work with that. But then all of their abilities and all of their profiles really want you to be kind of hugging and supporting other fighters. So it's kind of that split personality of, I'm not sure exactly what you want me to do just based off of these fighter cards. It wasn't until kind of looking into the objectives that I was like, maybe there's something here. So Skylar, unless you have some final thoughts on the fighter cards, we can move into those objectives.
Yeah, before we jump away, so it was going to drive me nuts. So I quickly double-checked the on Warhammer Underworld starter set rulebook, as well as the cards that came with them. I'm talking about the Farstriders and the Spalker Guard here. I'm just talking about the keywords that we see listed here, Priest and Befouler, Minion and Befouler. And it looks like, according to the new rules, we would see those in bold italic for Priest, Minion, because they're essentially just references, whereas something like Befouler, they're called out underneath their name, kind of a horse apiece. I could see it italicized or standing up bold, because they talk about how keywords that mean something are going to be in bold, whereas keywords for reference are going to be in a bold italic. So I guess all that really means is that at this point in time, the starter set, and this wouldn't be unheard of, is kind of ahead of itself a little bit here. So these fighters, were probably designed and ready to go before they decided to make the shift to bold italics for different keywords and what the difference between standing bold and italicized would mean. So neither here nor there, but it was going to bug the crap out of me. So I wanted to take a look and see why, since these are coming out after our starter set. And maybe we'll see a consistency with that going forward into the next season.
Gotcha. Another mystery solved by Skylar and the gang.
Yeah.
So moving on to...
You definitely know now that if you need to torture Skylar, give him a weird rules question and don't give him access to a rule book. It'll drive him nuts.
What about Geneva suggestions?
What?
You heard it here first, folks.
Also,
denying Skylar access to a rule book is a war crime. Moving on to our objectives here. So now that we've gotten the fighter profiles out of the way, we're going to kind of move ahead to some highlights of each of the card categories. So starting with our objectives, let's kind of go around the room and we'll just go kind of in the same order. I'm going to start with Phil, go to Skylar, and then I'll give kind of my own favorite. So Phil, go ahead and let me know what's your highlight objective here? What kind of speaks this warband's language?
Yeah. So having just gotten off of Skritter, I feel like it's apt to mention this one. He's in the artwork and probably is what's referenced in the title. This objective is called Useful Distraction. This is a surge that you score immediately after an activation step in which a friendly minion was supporting a friendly fighter, or a supporting friendly minion was the target of an attack action.
Excuse me, that was also a surviving friendly minion, not a supporting friendly minion on the second part.
An activation step in which a friendly minion was supporting a friendly fighter or a surviving friendly minion was the target of an attack action.
So not worthless.
So this is an absolutely automatic score. You will guaranteed be able to score this every single game, which makes it an auto include. It's not very creative, but it's certainly very good. And I think you would be in a very weird position to not want to use this objective every single time you play this warband.
I would quite agree on that. Skylar, any of note for you in the objectives?
Sorry, just circling back through the surges here because that was my pick, and I don't want to pick an end phase because I'm not too hot on them. Yeah, so I think that their surges have quite a bit to offer. Blessed by Corruption is another one featuring our useful little Skritter. And the surge here is score this immediately after an opponent's activation step if a friendly minion is on an objective in enemy territory. And the reason I like this is if you know what's in your deck, you can toss one right over the line, kind of at the start. However, speaking kind of towards their game plan, I actually think you're going to want one in no one's territory as an easy way to corrupt that territory. Regardless, if you can just sneak in, sit on one, everybody's a minion that isn't your leader. So everybody can help make this happen. The one thing that's of note here that makes this harder than your usual, like, hey, where's somebody at the end of an activation, is it is immediately after an opponent's activation step. So you're coming off of your power step from the activation where maybe you set this up, or the power step where you set this up, and then you're having to continue to hold that past their activation here. And their profiles aren't the greatest for that. However, I want to call out, I guess at this time, that Voidcure's Thralls is a potential pairing for them. And if you can survive the hit, then you can stick around.
It's true.
That's a big if. So the one that I want to call out as kind of a highlight is Rabid Harbingers. And here's the card text. So Surge, score this immediately after an opponent's activation step if your warband holds 2 or more objectives and 1 or more friendly befoulers are on an objective token in your territory. So this and some cards like it were kind of what I wouldn't say it's the greatest of all strategies, but kind of gave me the design space that these guys are looking for here, and it's kind of hold back, inspire, and then advance, right? So basically this warband and this surge in particular wants you to hold in your territory, inspire, get those 2 territories corrupted, and then do an all-out surge with your inspired attack profiles, because these guys aren't here for a long time, they're here for a good time. And this card in particular kind of highlights that play style for me.
Yeah, I would agree. But again, they have these weird other cards that it's like sometimes you give them this impression that it's like, oh, we can kind of hang back and wait and build things up. And then they've got these other end phase cards that are just like, get out there and be aggressive.
And I think those are the ones that you really want to ignore on these guys. Like, I mean,
it's like half their objectives.
It is half their objectives because they do require kills, and their attack profiles aren't terrible, but when they start out, they're inaccurate and they have really squishy profiles. So you want to be able to have as many of those brutal, souped up attack profiles in the late game as possible. And you want those to be more denial and disruption as opposed to, a hold tech. Because these guys aren't going to be that great at holding anyway. One of them, for starters, can't hold. So I really think it's going to come down to what universals are available, particularly in Nemesis and Championship. And I think Skylar kind of hit the nail on the head with Void Cursed Thralls being something they want, because you might not knock the rat out, but at least you're not going to knock them off of an objective if they're Void Cursed.
Yeah, I think that's going to be big for them. And with Rabid Harbingers, we've already hit a few wish lists where we're kind of trying to get in the shoes of the design space here and think through, like, when we take a look at this, what are we feeling is missing? Now, we don't have the reps in yet, right? But like, I wish that we'd seen this. So we've kind of been developing this wish list. And here with Rabid Harbingers, I wish it was just your warband is on 2 feature tokens, or your friendly fighters on 2 feature tokens. It's interesting to me that they leave Skritter out of this equation here, and forces a hold. And I feel like that would have put more pressure on dealing with this fighter that isn't going to give you glory. And I would have found that interesting. But again, that's wish list land. It's just interesting that it's a hold objective.
Yeah, continues to make me feel like they're designed to be flex, where you're doing 2 different things, and I will, I guess, continue to reserve judgment until I actually see more reps with them, but it feels like it's a tall order to ask them to be flex. They're not like a warband where they can rely on reviving fighters to guarantee that they can continue to flex. They don't have multiple defense dice to just try and survive the onslaught. It's just a little bit weird. I guess if I had to say, this is probably, outside of Velmorn's, this might be my least favorite warband that's come out in these 2 sort of half seasons so far.
Oh, snap. So you'd put Loon Court above these fellas?
I think Loon Court at least are more design coherent. I don't want to play Loon Court, but like Loon Court or aggro, right? You don't have to worry about it. You're just like, well, we're doing some weird stuff. Here we go.
I think you might want to revisit Loon Court and then see if that statement still stands.
I mean, I think it does. At least in Championship, it does. I don't remember what they do in Rivals, and I don't really care. But like these guys in Champs are going to be a mess, right?
I mean,
so Champs is actually.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Champs is where I think they really have legs. I actually think that their Rivals package is where they're the most rough, and I feel like refinement through pairings is going to shine out those edges. With with the Nemesis pairings, we're looking at I think like Beastbound Assault and Void Curse Thralls as strong pairings to really give you the chance to start going towards a focused game plan and cutting out what you feel isn't going to work for you. But then, and I know we're getting ahead of ourselves here. We're only in the objectives conversationally in the podcast. But as you then get to dip into Championship, and in that case, you get to take both things from Beastbound Assault and Void Curse Thralls. But it doesn't end there. You get to dip into the Chaos Grand Alliance. And I think that they have some of the strongest Grand Alliance cards available to them, including Weighty Blessing as an obvious pick here to start helping with their defensive profiles.
So before we get into too much of that, we are getting a bit ahead of ourselves. We've still got 2 more categories to go over. Next up, we've got our Gambit cards. So same round. Phil, go ahead and let me know what your highlight pick of the Gambits is.
Yeah, so one power card that they have that I really like is Overpowering Odors. So this is a reaction that you get to play during a friendly fighter's range 1 or 2 attack action after the defense roll. So you'll know that you are going to use it when you need it, which is always great to see. If the attack action would fail and there were 1 or more successes in the attack roll, you then get to add 1 to the number of successes in the attack. So basically, this is like getting to just sort of sneak your attack through when you need to. I have to imagine for a warband that has somewhat limited starting accuracy that this is going to be a huge accuracy boost. And these kinds of surprise accuracy boosts, I think, are always really rough because people think like, I'm in the clear here. I don't need to like play out extra defensive tech because their chance of hitting isn't very high. And then they sneak this in just because they managed to tie on your successes.
I would definitely echo those sentiments until your opponent rolls all defensive crits.
Well, I mean,
I'm looking at you, Tyler.
Yeah, he's looking at microphone. I'll add to that look I'm receiving that at least you can hold it in hand, right? And I think that's exciting, right? You don't have to show this in advance and hang your hopes and dreams on if the conditions will happen. Like the moment this comes out, it's going to feel really good. It's going to change the results instantly, right? And the fact that you get to hold it until you see, it's not going to go through, right? Means you're not wasting it on an attack that would have already gone through. So I think you're going to be pretty happy with this card most of the time. Yes, crit defenses happen, but when they don't here, you're either A, not having to spend it because your attacks are working, or B, it'll push it over the edge and get it out. I like this card a lot. I think it's one of their strongest cards and probably my favorite as well.
I'm sorry I keep picking your favorites.
Oh, Skylar. No, that's okay.
All right, Skylar. So since he picked your favorite, what's your second favorite?
I've got a runner-up already lined up here. We've got Festering Sneak. That I like it because it says push 2, and I'm on the What the Hex cast right now, bringing this to you. And this is choose a friendly minion, push the chosen minion up to 2 hexes. After that push, that minion must be adjacent to 1 or more enemy fighters and or a friendly leader. So Anytime you see push 2, you want to straighten up in your seat a little and go, ooh, what's that about? And the fact that it's minions is fantastic because this simply means you're moving anybody that isn't your leader. Happy to see that. I'm happy to see that it's not leader restricted, but it does have the flexibility to, if your leader is alive, use your leader as a landing target, or close the gap on an enemy fighter, and that could help you with supporting against supporting an attack that you're bringing in on your next activation, or help get you into that spot. Maybe they're charged out and you just need to get over the line. Maybe you want to have a shot at an attack, or even just that position, going into your next turn, give you a little further boost off your movement speed. I just have only good things to say about this card. I like it a lot.
All right. I coming in with my pick, I've got Rancid Vomit. Just kidding. I don't love this one. So that one is that one's roll 1 magic die on a roll of focus. Choose an enemy fighter adjacent to one or more friendly befoulers. Deal 2 damage to the chosen fighter. So it's got a positional, and 33% of the time it works every time. Leave this one at home, folks.
I would say
save yourself the misery.
That card is in line with its flavor text. It's about as disgusting as it gets.
Indeed. Now, certainly. on the realsies side, I would have to say my favorite pick is Pestilent Blessing. So it's choose a friendly minion. The chosen minions range 1 to range 2 attack actions have Grievous 1. In addition, the chosen minion is a Befouler. This effect persists until the end of the round or until that minion is taken out of action. So I like this for 2 reasons. One, I was like, all of the ones that have Grievous are not Befoulers, and all of the ones that are already Befoulers don't have Grievous. So, like, any time you're doing this, you're really only giving them Grievous 1, until I remembered we're in the Weird Hollow, baby. This is 2023, and Grievous stacks. So I felt a little bit better about that one, knowing that it was able to stack with that. So if you did have somebody that was already a Befouler, okay, now they're working on Grievous too. In addition, that Befouler keyword just helps do the things that they want to do.
Yeah, which I think there's a few different cards here, and we don't need to talk about all of them, but I think there's a couple of different things that'll like help move you towards the corruption game plan in ways that are maybe subtle enough that it's like, oh wait, I can actually do this thing. I think Festering Sneak is actually a great example for that, in that, like, I need to push a fighter into a position to corrupt this territory. Well, being able to do that after all the activations of a round is a good way to make sure you just don't end up dead.
Right.
I think quickly move is a similar situation. You can make a friendly minion make a move.
Love that name.
Which
indeed
is, for equal reasons, probably good for their game plan. And then I think it would be remiss not to mention they do have one power card here that lets you try, keyword on try, to corrupt a territory in the power phase. So this is Manifestation of the Great Plague. So you can choose a friendly priest and roll a magic dice, and on a roll of a channel or a crit, the territory is corrupted that the priest is in. I don't know that you take this, but it seems like a good way to help shore up your corruption strategy. And so I feel like people are going to need to experiment with stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it also kind of feels bad because it's like, not only is it not guaranteed, it's now taking up one of my gambit slots for not doing something more useful.
I'd like to talk about this card for a second because it is restricted to a priest, and the effect is going to happen in the priest territory. Now, without an upgrade, spoilers, granting somebody priest status, this is your leader. So if you're willing to risk your leader's positioning to make this happen, I wish it wasn't on a 50-50. I look at the Mad Mob, they want primacy, right?
It's a 66% chance.
Oh, okay. Sorry, 66. Okay. But to bring it to the Mad Mob, and you're correct. I was thinking focus and crit there. But the Mad Mob, they want primacy. They actually have a Gambit card that just says, grab the primacy token. Just go for it, right? And it's actually flexible beyond that. But the point there is that that's guaranteed. They have a card in their deck that guarantees them a piece of their game plan. So with them looking at generally 2 or more territories corrupted, I'm not sure why we're hanging 1 territory corrupted on both positioning and a dice roll, as well as having this card in hand.
I would agree.
I definitely agree. I think maybe the other thing that really bugs me about corrupted is that it's so temporary. Like, if it lasted for the rest of the game, it would start to feel like this inevitable thing where eventually they're all going to be corrupted and it'd be super hard to deal with. But because it goes away, it's like, well, as long as you can kill the rats, eventually, by the end of the game, not all the territories will be corrupted.
Yeah. And on that note, I think that sentiment is kind of echoed in Rancid Vomit. Like, it didn't need to be a 1 in 3 chance card. It's already limited by befoulers and adjacency. Why not just knock it down to 1 damage and just make it happen?
Or even just add some sort of like window requirement, like looking at the Gortrusin of Drum as a recent example. It's like, hey, I'm going to hit you for 2. But, I mean, if you have some push tech to move you away and I don't, then you're fine. Right? Like, just adding a little something that's more within the player's control than hanging it on a dice roll. Yeah, no, I would agree.
All right. So now that we've talked about a lot of the gambits, let's move on to our upgrades, starting once again with Phil.
Yeah, and I guess I will mention here. I mean, I feel like I'm being a little critical of these guys, but I do feel like their gambits are relatively good. So I don't hate what's happening there. I have skepticism about their game plan, but overall, they've got some pretty interesting upgrades as well. I think a lot of them are just good and not particularly interesting, and I don't necessarily want to mention those ones, but I do like, there's one called Glorious Sacrifice. So it says, when this fighter is taken out of action, if the territory they are in is not corrupted by your warband, the territory is corrupted by your warband. So pretty basic. But then it has this sort of rider where it's just like, otherwise, in case you've already corrupted and you don't gain anything there, you also will gain a glory point and break the upgrade. So it's got an out. So like, if you're really on your game plan for corruption, at least it takes the sting of losing a fighter away, which could be really nice, to effectively mean that the game state doesn't really change. Your opponent doesn't pull ahead because you lost a fighter, which is pretty cool. Don't know how good this is actually going to end up being, but again, it feels like one of those ones where you have to kind of experiment with, because corrupted feels like it's going to be important for making the warband tick.
Yeah, I think this card's really interesting.
I would agree.
Think that because it says if the territory they are in is not corrupted by your warband, the territory is corrupted, right? Otherwise, gain 1 glory. I think that's furtherly interesting, given that they won't be able to help re-corrupt an already corrupted area. So if your fighter donning this upgrade dies in round 2 in a corrupted territory that's going to fizzle out at the end of the action, you won't be able to choose, no, I want this death to re-corrupt this area. You'll have to take the additional glory, which great. It's glory. I mean, if I have to take
It's not bad, right?
Right. If I have to take something as a consolation prize here, a glory's a nice thing to be given, but it won't further that game plan in that particular moment. So you're gonna want to be careful about where somebody dies with this. But if you're trying to use them to recorrupt, but it's a really interesting card. I'm on board with it.
Yeah, it's interesting that they have it say that it breaks, but they have no way to revive fighters. So it's like, why?
You're absolutely right. I was racking my brain doing the same exact thing, thinking, why bother breaking it? Like, unless they're kind of future proofing it.
Yeah, which is probably the case, because it could be broken in the future by some universal, like, bring a fighter back thing.
Yeah. Props to them for future proofing it, and looking forward to that Grand Alliance card.
All right. Hey, Skylar, would you do me a big favor and take Pox-ridden Lucidity so I don't have to?
I absolutely will. You read
Thanks.
my mind and thankfully filled in it this time. And that is, again, Pox-ridden Lucidity. This is absolutely my favorite upgrade. Josh, I'm a little surprised you would, because it mentions drawing, but what it says specifically is reaction. Use this after this fighter's first successful range 1 or range 2 attack action in a round. So they do need to succeed in attack to make this go off. Pick one, either draw 1 power card or draw 1 objective card, then place 1 objective card on the bottom of your objective deck. Now, this is restricted. We can only put this on 3 of the named fighters, and those are Rubidius, Poxlick, and Ricket. What I love about this card is not only the ability to draw a card. Josh is quite familiar with my love for drawing cards, and we've been in hot debates over whether or not it's good for the game. But if I can pick something that can get me there, that can get me further through my power card deck, then I'm going to do it. It makes my power card deck more reliable. But it doesn't stop there. It allows me to draw an objective card before replacing an objective card. And I think this is the first time the game has seen that sequence order, because you'll actually be sitting on a hand of 4 and being able to choose your cut instead of having to choose it out of your 3 and drawing the replacement. And that is fascinating, both in the fact that this ability helps you situate your game plan, but in that sequencing as well.
It's a really interesting idea. I will love to see how it works out in practice. Hand smoothing is a term in Magic where, like, you're not actually gaining a card in the objective. Like, if you're using the objective mode of this, you're not gaining an extra objective. You still stay at the same number, but you don't lose one either. So it's actually just smoothing out the hand that you have. So it's like, oh, this thing now I can't do. It goes back into the deck to try and do it later. Which I think you're right, we probably haven't seen before, but if it can work out well, like we maybe think it can, this could be really powerful. But it is so new and such a strange concept for this particular game that I would honestly need to see it in action. But I do like the design space, and I hope they keep doing more of this.
I agree. And I love that term. Hand smoothing has been added to my vernacular. Thank you.
Yeah.
I also like the latter half of that. I'm much more about that than just draw tech in general, simply because, like Phil's saying, it doesn't really gain you anything other than I would say readjusting your battle plan, right? One of the things that we kind of discussed in chattering about this warband beforehand was the objective Ruinous Supremacy. And just for context, that score in an end phase if your warband holds more objectives than there are surviving enemy fighters. I labeled it as a objective that I would take with this warband if they showed that they could score consistently. So having that 13th objective just to kind of flex over. And if there was more of this hand smoothing tech to kind of take that and set that towards the end of my game plan, that would just be that much better. And I think this is something that I would love to see kind of developed as a universal aspect of the game, because I think that's one of the things that most people would agree is kind of a rub with Underworlds is, we do have mulliganing, but after that the cards are set. There's not a whole lot you can do about how your objective hand plays out. So I would love to see more of this.
I love the design space. I do feel if this was just a universal effect, that I would be in heated disagreement with you. Like a Grand Alliance, sure, but available to everyone, I don't love. Genuinely, I like the chance to find a bricked hand, because then you can work on taking fighters out of action and messing with their plan. And I like that give and take to this game. It's like, okay, I don't have a perfect objective hand right now. Maybe I've got something I can play towards, and the other two I know right now I can't. And that just happened because this is the exact suboptimal, card draw that is baked into my 12 card pick here. But when that happens, I never think in Underworld you're without options, because that's when counterplay really kicks in. And I like that give or take. Like, didn't get the hand I wanted. That's all right. Let's mess with their game plan a little bit. Let's try to focus in on that. That's where I live. I do like this effect. Don't get me wrong. I think I'd be remiss or remiss might not be the right word there, but like to see both Mulligan and this as common effects. I think Mulligan serves well enough to get the ball rolling and get your game started.
Well, could be another interesting debate episode. We could have mechanics that we disagree about.
Yeah, my upgrade pick is Bursting Sores. So, as a reaction, use this after an activation step if this fighter was dealt damage in the preceding activation. Choose an enemy fighter within 2 hexes of this fighter. Deal 1 damage to that enemy fighter. So, on first glance, this feels defensive, right? Take damage, deal damage in response. Until you realize that you can run through a lethal and just deal damage with pocket. I don't know what you'd call it. Pocket hand pus. I don't know, right? Like you're throwing some diseased goop at somebody because you stubbed your toe on a lethal hex. Like I really like this because it does have that flexibility of you're working with a very squishy warband. And I think that's the right design space to have something like this, where you choose to do damage to yourself and deal damage to your opponent in kind of a clutch situation.
So I hate to burst your sore here. However, I'm pretty confident the fighter has to survive to get to this reaction step.
You are correct. They do have to survive.
And I think that's a bit ugly, as far as including this in your deck.
I mean,
for Josh's use case where you're doing the damage to yourself, though, then you control it.
That's right. True.
And I think that's where the flexibility lies, and where I don't think it's the best card in the world, but I think it's worth considering for having that ping.
I love Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, because not only are you throwing damage out in the form of a potential attack action, which, when we rely on dice, we know what happens. Dice do what they do. But then you also have that added ping, and you can either use that to follow up a kill and kind of finish that off, or you can kind of reach a little bit towards another fighter that only needs 1 damage to be taken down. All that to say is it It comes with some drawbacks, but it's a guaranteed damage when used offensively.
I don't disagree. I think you pick great strength over this every time. And to that end, I think, if you're looking at like a 3 format step ladder, I think in Rivals, this card's fantastic. This is super fun. And Nemesis, this might make your deck. I think it does. In Championship, I think you weed it out, right? So it's kind of like, I like cards like that. I truly do, where they serve different functions or serve you better across different formats.
I will say I really like this design space if you could do something like Reavers, where you actually want to be hurting yourself to hurt your opponent. Unfortunately, I don't think the Warband actually works that way, even if they have some things that would kind of suggest that they can be that, like, I don't care about defense aggro Warband, but I feel like in practice that just won't happen. They just don't have the objective support for it, but it's one of the most creative parts that they've ever had in the game, and they've very quickly backtracked on it and taken a lot of it out of the game or restricted a lot of it. And I understand it can be really a bad feel to have somebody, what's it called? The 7 fighters out of action, the
Pure Carnage.
Pure Carnage effects.
Yeah,
when people
score
are just,
pure carnage off of killing your own dog.
Yeah, when people
does that.
When people start doing that kind of stuff, it's a real feel bad. But I think it's some of the most creative design space that they've ever had in the game, and so I'm a little sad that we pulled away from it. But kind of digressing. But this card, if it was just in Reavers, would be amazing. So I'll just leave it there. But anyway,
yeah, I like those thoughts. You've mentioned Magic the Gathering more than a few times on the podcast. And when I played Magic, Death or Black was my favorite simply because there were so many effects around what you described where you're hurting yourself to further your game plan. And yeah. I enjoy that design space.
The reckless sort of nature of which fits chaos, right? It's I'm going to give up something to gain power.
Yeah,
which is cool. It's cool design space.
Agreed.
And so speaking of chaos and really, truly terrible segues, how do we feel about the viability of this warband in each of the play sets? So Rivals, Nemesis, and Championship. Let's start with Rivals.
Oof. I will lead off and say I think all warbands can compete in Rivals. I think these guys, between their fairly strong gambits and their very generically good upgrades, can probably do very well in Rivals. I wonder, though, with their objectives and their very bad defensive statistics, if they are going to be able to hold up if they're fighting against something like I don't know, anything with lots of ping, which exists in droves right now. Lots of aggro warbands. We're gonna probably give them trouble. Gortros and Udram in Rivals feel like they would eat these guys lunch. So I think they're probably kind of middle of the pack. They can do stuff. Everybody can do stuff in Rivals. Everybody's relatively close on footing except for a few outliers, and they should be fun, I think, if nothing else, because they are such a weird, different kind of warband.
I would agree. And to kind of echo your statement, I think most warbands, if not all, with a valid Rivals deck, or even just a Rivals plugin, right, can perform in Rivals, but they can also meet their own end based on card draw and such. And so with that in mind, the game that Josh and I had to kind of get ourselves used to this warband was the Plaguepack versus Josh's card draw. And also Sons of Elmorn were at the table.
Yeah, they decided to show up and roll crits to be my third opponent.
Yep.
Yeah.
which was just amazing.
And that happens. That's Rivals, and that's the landscape. I think if you're somebody listening to this podcast and Rivals is something that you spend a lot of time in, you're familiar with that. It's going to be the place where card draw can hit you the most because you weren't able to pair what already exists and create a more focused game plan. So when card draw is coming out suboptimally, that it feels extra bad here because you don't have the stat lines to stand on your own while you wait for your card draw to catch up.
I would agree. All right, so moving on to Nemesis. What do we think about some strong picks? What do we think about how they fare in that playstyle?
Well, I will I think one of you take first crack at this, but I do want to mention, we've already mentioned that I think we like Beastbound Assault and Void Curse Thralls for these guys, and I think those are definitely strong choices. But yeah, floor is yours for first comments.
I would agree with what's already been stated as far as the Beastbound Assault. I'll let Skylar speak more to the Void Cursed, simply for the fact that they've already got the minion keyword baked into all but one of their fighter cards. So they've got that going for them right off the rip. They've got the drive to be in enemy territory, even if it's somewhat sparingly. And then they also have a surge that already runs almost exactly parallel to one of the ones in Beastbound Assault, which is, move twice and have been in your territory, no one's territory, and enemy territory. Whereas Scuttling Horde is score this immediately after your warband's third or successive move action. So you can score both of those with the same activity. Now, the odds of you moving or seeing both of those in the hand at the same time is relatively low, but being able to have your surge just that much more consistent is pretty neat. So, Skylar, if you've got opinions on Void Cursed, now would be the time to share them.
So, I want to kick these opinions off with, guys, I did not expect to find myself here. I did not expect to see a warband featuring the Skaven and get excited. But I'm excited. This is a warband I want to play the hell out of and see if I can't make work. I want to beat my head against a wall when things don't work and figure out how to make them tick. This is something you can expect reps out of from me. And Void Crystal,
Man,
go ahead.
Those pointy ears really do it for you, don't they?
Yeah, that's been pointed out to me. I shared my excitement with the guys behind the scene, and that was the first thing that came up. And yeah, they got pointy ears, don't they?
Little stinkier than your brand, but they do have them pointy ears.
Yeah. So, and to that point, they also have very reminiscent of Elvish defensive profiles, right? I'm looking at 1 dodge and 3 health a lot of the time, and oh boy, am I familiar with that. But I'm excited. I think that this warband stands to be a unique warband in the positioning game plan space, that you don't always have to set in objectives to further their game plan. And I like that a lot. It can just be about managing where you are in relationship to no man's territory. You're going to flirt with that line. You're going to use push tech to get you exactly where you need to be in those final power steps. I'm excited. And I think Void Curse Thralls is an excellent pairing for them for so many reasons. If you do need a Bufouler to hang out on an objective, that could be a Void Curse Bufouler, and therefore can't be driven back. They obviously do need to survive, but to that end, in most cases, that's a defensive boon. That bumps you up to a shield result instead of a dodge result, and that can be as early as round 1. So I like that. Bumping me up defensively, making sure I can't be driven back, helping my game plan. Love that. And then within Void Curse Thrall, we've got some tools that I definitely want to highlight. We've got 3 movement tricks, 2 in upgrade, 1 in their power, where we're just getting access to out of sequence move actions. And in the upgrade case, don't even have to be void cursed. Loving that idea. And then in objectives, we have the 2-point objective in threatening presence, I do believe. I'll double check that name. However, what the objective I'm seeking states is that you have more fighters than your enemy fighters in 2 territories. And that's something that I think they're going to be able to do, like as they're trying to spread out on corrupt territories, especially rounds 1 and 2. This kind of falls apart in round 3, but I'm going to see what I can do there. Threatening presence. Score this in an end phase if there are more friendly fighters. So not, unfortunately, equal to or greater than. That would make this sing even further. But they have a 1-point end phase called Unwitting Guardians, where our Void Cursed fighter is on a feature token. So you can have a Fowler Void Cursed hanging out on a feature token, helping you out with that corruption, also scoring you a reliable 1-pointer. And I like all of this. Void Cursed Thralls will be something I'm exploring.
Definitely cool to have something that feels like it works well there. I have yet to really find something I would want to try Void Curse Thralls with. For my take, I would probably still reach for Daring Delvers for these guys. It's still my favorite pairing in Nemesis, and it just has so many tricks and passive scoring options where all it cares about is positioning. And as far as I can tell, all these guys care about is positioning. Being on objectives is nice, but is not required. So that would kind of be where I would end up, but I definitely see Beastbound Assault as being useful for these guys as well. I think that pretty well segues us into champs, though. If we were to take kind of all of our picks for things to try in Nemesis and like jam them all together, it probably starts to give us a picture of what we're doing in champs, right?
Yeah, and this is where I really think that this is a gem where you can continue to buff out the edges the further you get into the deck building formats. So as soon as you get access to the Grand Alliance, you get some help with the defense. You get some hyper aggressive cards that they have available to them as well, including the one, we were talking about how much we liked, taking something away from yourself for a benefit or a potential benefit. There's a card, Josh, you'll have to remind me of the name, that's rather rude, where after you've seen both the attack and defense results, you can choose to take damage and re-roll an amount of dice in your attack that's incoming on an already known defense, dice characteristic there. Why not if you're going for the aggro game plan here, or leaning, into the flex side?
That's a Reckless Bargain.
That's what or Reckless Pact.
Reckless Pact. Yep.
There it is.
Yep. That one is has an extra trigger for Zine Schwarbands where they just get to have a free.
They get a free one.
Yeah, that's so good with Ephelum and eyes, right? Right, guys?
Yeah. I mean, it's good for eyes.
Yeah, that's definitely something they can do.
It's funny that you mention eyes. And of course, these guys are not eyes. I'm not saying that they're eyes, but I feel like their base stats and some of their in-faction design is it feels lukewarm to me, where I'm like, this works, but I don't know how I love it. And it's kind of like, yeah, we can really work and workshop these guys and get them to a point where we're happy with this. And then you're still going to have to deal with the warbands that have all those better tools and got to do the workshopping stuff. And I kind of hate that. when I like get to the end of my champs workout and I'm like, these guys feel great now. And then you're like, oh yeah, but I still don't have like half of the tools that some of these other warbands have. Because
I would agree. And that kind of segues into kind of the final thoughts I have. So Skylar, unless you have some like real particular championship stuff, are you guys okay if we transition to that?
I'm good with a transition here. I've already represented that I get more excited about this warband the more cards I get to splice in.
Yep.
Cool. So my impression with this warband, kind of as I was thinking about it in the like grand scheme of releases, is that this warband almost feels like it was designed as a video game encounter or kind of a D&D encounter where they're not designed necessarily to be good, great, dominating. They're designed to be across the table and an experience for somebody. So if you think about maybe your new player that you're first introducing to the game, these Skaven would be a perfect like baby's first enemy, right? You can do some really rude stuff with them. They've got some tricks up their sleeve, but at the end of the day, that new player is going to be able to rush up, do some simple attack actions, deal with the problem, still think creatively, right? Like they do have the mechanic where they're going to be in certain regions and you probably need to deny that, but this is more of a fun, crunchy experience to have across the table than more of a competitor. And I think that's kind of where we're seeing a little bit of a divide between warbands is, are these guys tooled for championship? So like your Ephelims, your Storm Coven, your Gnarl Spirit pack, and then you've got your fun, crunchy stuff that is designed to be fun, right? Like it's just designed to be experienced rather than competitive. So I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on that.
I'll put out the caveat of like, we will say all of this and be very happy to be very wrong. And you can definitely let us know how wrong we are if we end up being very off base with all of this. But I would hope that there's no intentional designing of warbands in that frame where it's like, these ones are going to be like competitors and these ones are fluffy. Because I don't want a purported highly competitive game to ever be designed that way, because it designs winners, and I don't think that that's intentional. It feels unintentional to me. I do wonder,
I would agree,
sometimes about like, where do things end up in playtesting? Like it almost, and I feel like I've said this kind of thing before, and I don't know if it's anything that anyone cares about because it's like complete conjecture, but it's like, it almost feels like these guys had more mechanics when they were being designed, and then they were like, it's too good, we need to keep taking things away. So like, I almost wonder if they were like, okay, we're starting them out with the normal rat things where it's like they are speed 5, multiple defense dice, maybe some of them can be like revived, and they're like, this is too much, they're too strong, start taking it back. So they're like, okay, they don't get an extra dice, they just go to block. Okay, they're not speed 5, they're speed 4. Like this is the first Rats warband that's speed 4 base, which is weird.
I hear you, and I honestly think that's more of a like one of those decisions that was crunchy but not good. They're plague rats. Like they're not going to be as healthy as normal rats and running at the same speed. But typically when you go into that design space, they're also a little more hardy because it's like, well, this rat doesn't care that its entrails are on the outside. Why would it care that you poked it with a sharp stick, right? So, and I agree with you. I don't think it's great to be kind of playing the winners or losers game, but it's kind of one of the only explanations I've got for such a drastic difference between warbands, like talking about in recent design space, where you've got warbands like Loon Court, and then almost in the same breath you've got Ephelims and Storm Coven. Like, that's, all games have their balance issues. No game is perfect, but I think we see some of these warbands come out and the difference is so drastic between them that it's like, well, are we trying for two categories? Are we trying for the fun, friendly encounter and the competitive category? Or is that just kind of the nature of the beast?
So I'll jump in here. I would agree that their defensive profiles and wounds characteristics available to them paint a rough picture. You know, you're fragile. You're going to need to get used to adapting on the fly to fewer and fewer fighters. Hopefully, this warband isn't seeing themselves shut out by round 3 most of the time, but I recognize that that's potentially there. It takes, 6, 7, maybe 8, successful attacks to take this warband apart before like ploys. Okay. However, and I will say as well, I was surprised to not see any sort of resurrection mechanic in this warband. I think they're really puzzly. I currently would like to think that we're undervaluing their potential along the lines of when Elethane's Soul Raid came out. I remember when they came out, people were really hesitant to award them any sort of, strong status, that they were complicated, that they didn't have, that they had fragile stat lines, that they didn't have too much to offer. And then the players got a hold of them, and it took a little bit of time for, the Soul Raid to rise, but now the Soul Raid's known as a strong contender. And I hope, there's elements here that we're not seeing. But one thing I wanted to cover along the lines of, experiences is I like that train of thought, that a warband can bring this unique, this fresh experience across the table, and you can have, as an opponent, this experience of fighting, in this case, these plague rats that are trying to corrupt territories, and that theme is realized. That's extremely cool. And we've seen that before in something like the Exiled Dead, right? When they came out, there was this horde of zombies that really brought that theme to life, where all of a sudden you were just getting surrounded by zombies, and they're breaking the action economy on their side to realize that theme and really make it feel like anytime you're up against them, you're against a zombie horde. I love that. And what I'm hearing, you kind of say is you feel like that theme realization kind of weighs in on the strong side, as we've talked about Exiled Dead before, whereas this one kind of weighs in on the strictly serving the theme but not handling the competitive side. And I would just like to reemphasize that I hope that there's a puzzle here yet to be uncovered along the lines of the Soul Raid, and that when you're playing the Plaguepack, it's not just, holding tight and hoping that your enemy doesn't succeed in playing their whack a plague mole game.
I will say that I don't think they're trashed here. I think they're going to be difficult to pilot, and maybe they're Soul Raid material where there is something that I'm missing here. I think some of the things that are going to keep them evergreen and keep them at least contending for that viability title is a strong surge pool. I think they've got some really solid surges that are fairly easy to score regardless of the environment that they're in. Aggro, hold meta, whatever. They've got access. They also have some solid move tech, which regardless of what style you're playing, being in the right position and being able to orchestrate where you're at on the board is, once again, always a good tool. I guess the flip side of that coin is their downsides are also evergreen. So those 1-die defense and those low wound fighter profiles, those things are also going to stick around. There's not going to be much support to kind of shore that up. So I think regardless of what we see from them, it's going to be fairly consistent, because whatever this warband is, good, bad, or ugly, it's going to remain as is, pretty regardless of what universals pop out, I think.
I think that's pretty fair.
Yeah.
Cool. So, before we wrap up, any final thoughts on this warband? I should say, any more final thoughts on this warband?
Sure. I did find it interesting that their objectives from an end phase standpoint, they have 2 1s, 2 2s, and 2 3s.
Ooh.
And I think
That's interesting.
Yeah, right. And I think in each of those counts, there is one that stands out as your easier option. And I feel the second option in both of those glory counts is a little bit of an ask for those glory counts. Like, I guess to just kind of give an example real quick, there is one glory end phase called the Leader's Privilege. 2 or more friendly minions are within 2 hexes of a friendly leader, and those minions are in no one's or enemy's territory. So, exactly. This card is asking you to position 3 total fighters for a total of 1 glory, putting 2 of them in risky territory and bringing your leader up just enough to be, if you're looking to protect your leader, to be rather questionable for a single glory. Whereas, in recent memory, we have, I believe, 3 surges, 3 gambit cards have left your hand, and you no longer have power cards, 2 glory in Ephelim's Pandemonium. And it's kind of like, I feel like it's a little easier to get 3 cards out of my hand than it is to position 3 fighters in risky positions. Why are these glory totals not flipped here? But
yep.
Yeah. However, I do think that when you're designing a warband for a rival's packaging, there should be cards that are harder, that ask harder questions of you for the glory that they offer, because you're playing that rivals format. And then as soon as you start deck building, there's these obvious choices to pull out of the deck. So I don't hate it, but I do question it a little bit.
I don't necessarily want to get too far onto that topic because it's not related, and it's probably a whole episode onto itself, but I strongly disagree that anything in a deck should be designed to be an immediate cut. But like I said, don't really want to get into the whole topic because that we could have a whole 2-hour discussion about that.
Yeah, that's fair. Look at us coming up with debate-episode topics.
I would kind of hedge Skylar's statement as I don't think there should be immediate cuts, but I do think there should be some obvious trades. So I know a lot of warbands have we often refer to them as great strength with a caveat. I think those are the type of cards that I like to see in rivals, where it's hey, this card works, it does what it's supposed to do, but there are easier and better versions in universals, and you could either commit to that damage lane, and now you've got great strength and a great strength with a caveat, or you can just do that simple swap.
Right. Yeah, a little different though, right? Because then it's giving you a decision point of like, are you trying to lean into having more damage? It's not a. I don't think it gives you an easy cut, unless you like just are like, I don't need more damage, so therefore I'll take the easiest choice. But most warbands run more than one damage booster, so But yeah, I get your point, and like I said, don't need to
rabbit hole. Yeah, for sure.
I absolutely agree. So speaking of rabbit holes, if you guys have opinions, you lovely listeners out there, and you want to share them, whether you think our opinions are good, bad, or ugly, go ahead and shout us out at whatthehexcast and whatthehexcast@gmail.com. Check out all our content at themortalrealms.com. We also have shirts now, so you can wear some semblance of our opinions on you with pride. Special thanks to the Mortal Realms for keeping the lights on for us. And coming up next, we have a surprise episode that will help us later. You guys ready for a flavor text quiz?
I will also say just quickly that a thanks to Games Workshop for providing this preview copy of this warband for us so that we can do these reviews early, so we can have them out for you guys as soon as they drop. Always appreciated, and we continue to love seeing it.
Absolutely. And though we may be a little heavy on the criticism, it comes from a place of love. We love this game, and we would love to see it be as best it can. So I have your flavor text quiz right here.
Hit us with
Nothing is given by chaos without appropriate sacrifice. I feel this fits Skylar's attitude towards this warband perfectly.
Ooh, which card is this?
Would you restate that one more time?
I absolutely would. Nothing is given by chaos without appropriate sacrifice.
Is that blessed by corruption?
It is not. I'll narrow it down for you guys. It's a little bit of a niche pick. It fits into the category of one of Skylar's favorite types of cards.
Is it draw tech?
It is absolutely draw tech. And it's Grand Alliance Chaos.
Oh, we jumped out of this here Rivals deck. Okay.
I think I maybe know what it is, but I can't remember what the card name is.
Do you remember what it do?
Is it the one where you have to like kill your own fighter to draw stuff?
It is.
Okay.
So it is Vile Offering, and that is deal 1 damage to a friendly fighter, then draw a power card, or 2 power cards if that damage took the fighter out of action.
Vile Offering. That's
interesting.
Yeah.
Ooh, I like that pick a lot. Especially,
it's a good card for this warband.
Yeah. Scooter, you've served your purpose. Draw me 2 cards.
All right. Now that we've got that out of the way, we've got recommended listening. This one is Bullet with Butterfly Wings by Smashing Pumpkins.
And for folks who have not heard the song, you will realize as soon as you listen to it why we picked it.
Despite all my rage, I am still just a rat in a cage.
And still tone deaf.
Perfect.
All right, folks. Thanks for listening. We have been What the Hex. I am Josh.
This is Phil.
And this has been Skylar.